On the forgotten outskirts of Pinewood, Montana, behind a veil of overgrown pines and weathered fence posts, stands a ramshackle farmhouse that recently sold for less than the price of a budget smartphone. What single mother Maria Lawson discovered beneath its warped floorboards has not only upended her desperate financial situation, but has brought federal investigators rushing to this sleepy mountain town. The contents uncovered in this century-old Holloway Ranch have sent shockwaves through national security agencies and forced historians to reconsider a classified chapter of American history that many powerful people hoped would remain buried forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The harsh Montana wind rattled through broken window panes as Maria Lawson stood in the doorway of what was now improbably her home. At 42, with premature gray threading through her dark hair and deep worry lines etched around her eyes, she embodied the weight of a woman who had been carrying too many burdens for too long. The property tax auction had seemed like her final desperate gamble, a last-ditch effort to provide some kind of stability for her two children after a bitter divorce left them nearly homeless. The auctioneer had barely concealed his pity when he called out the starting bid for the Holloway Ranch. $600 for 15 acres, a dilapidated farmhouse, and a barn that looked like it might collapse in the next strong gust. No, one in Pinewood wanted the responsibility of a property so far gone, with decades of back taxes finally forcing the county to sell. When Maria raised her hand, using the last of her teaching severance pay, the roomful of locals had exchanged knowing glances. "Poor woman doesn't know what she's getting into," their eyes seemed to say. Now, 3 weeks after signing the papers, Maria stood in the doorway, watching her children explore the overgrown property. 14-year-old Ethan, lanky and serious beyond his years, methodically tested each step on the wraparound porch, assessing which boards needed immediate replacement. 10-year-old Sophia darted between ancient apple trees, her laughter cutting through the heavy silence that seemed to blanket the abandoned ranch. The sound was so foreign here, joy in a place that had known only emptiness for nearly 2 decades. "Mom, there's a spring back here," Sophia called, her voice carrying across the property, real water coming right out of the ground. Maria smiled despite herself. For all its obvious flaws, the ranch offered something their cramped apartment in town never could: space to breathe, a place to belong. The divorce from Richard had left more than financial scars. It had stolen their sense of security, of permanence. The children had watched as their family home was sold to pay debts, as treasured possessions disappeared into strangers' hands. Now, even this broken-down ranch represented something precious, a fresh start that belonged to them alone. The Holloway Ranch had once been a centerpiece of the community, according to the few historical documents Maria had found in the Pinewood Library. Built in 1905 by Theodore Holloway, a timber merchant who had made his fortune during Montana's logging boom, the ranch had originally sprawled across 50 acres of prime valley land. Old photographs showed a stately white farmhouse with ornate trim, a massive red barn, and carefully tended gardens. The Holloways had been pillars of early Pinewood society, hosting summer socials and contributing generously to the town's first school. But the ranch's prominence had faded after World War II. Successive generations of Holloways had sold off parcels of land until only the central 15 acres remained. The last known resident, Eleanor Holloway, had died in 2003, leaving the property to distant relatives who never came to claim it. For 20 years, the ranch had stood empty, becoming a cautionary landmark on the outskirts of town. Local teenagers occasionally dared each other to spend the night in the haunted Holloway place, but otherwise, the property had been forgotten by all but the county tax assessor. When Maria had first walked through the house after the auction, she'd nearly wept at the magnitude of the task ahead. Every surface was coated with dust, so thick it muffled footsteps. Water damage stained the ceilings, and mice had made homes in the kitchen cabinets. The electricity had been disconnected decades ago, and the ancient plumbing groaned ominously. When tested, but beneath the neglect, Maria had glimpsed possibilities. Solid foundation stones, hand-carved woodwork that couldn't be replicated today, high ceilings that gave the rooms a sense of dignity even in decay. "We can do this," she'd whispered to herself, running her hand along a dust-covered banister. One step at a time. The reality of rural Montana living quickly tempered Maria's initial optimism. Their first night in the house had been spent, huddled together on air mattresses, jumping at every creak and groan of the settling structure. Without functioning heat, the mountain chill penetrated to their bones, despite layers of blankets. Maria had lain awake until dawn, questioning her decision, calculating impossible financial equations in her head. The small emergency fund she'd built working double shifts at the Pinewood Cafe and weekend bookkeeping for local businesses would barely cover essential repairs. The divorce had left her with nothing but debts and damaged credit, making traditional loans an impossibility. What Maria didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that the universe had planted her exactly where she needed to be, at precisely the right moment. The series of misfortunes that had led her to this desperate gamble were about to be revealed as stepping stones to an extraordinary discovery. The transformation began on their 5th day at the ranch. Maria had taken on the grueling task of cleaning the main floor, working methodically from the front entryway toward the back of the house. Ethan had been enlisted to help clear debris from the barn, while Sophia sorted through salvageable items in the root cellar. The physical labor was exhausting but purposeful, a concrete way to claim the space as their own. By late afternoon, Maria had reached the small study adjacent to the kitchen. Unlike the other downstairs rooms with their high ceilings and generous proportions, this space felt oddly constrained. The dimensions seemed slightly off, the corners not quite square. Most peculiar was the flooring, wide pine planks that ran perpendicular to the floorboards in the neighboring rooms. "That's strange," Maria murmured, kneeling to examine the transition. Her years of teaching elementary school had honed her attention to patterns and inconsistencies. Something about this room didn't follow the logical flow of the house's design. She ran her hands along the baseboards, noting how they seemed newer than the ornate moldings in the living room. The wall separating the study from the kitchen was unnecessarily thick, at least 8 inches, where 6 would have been standard. Maria's curiosity deepened as she began to scrub the floorboards, revealing wood that was a slightly different shade than elsewhere in the house. As she worked her way toward the center of the room, her brush dislodged decades of grime from between 2 floorboards, revealing what appeared to be a thin metal seam. Maria paused, her heart suddenly beating faster. The seam formed a perfect rectangle approximately 3 feet by 4 feet in the middle of the floor. "Ethan," she called, her voice echoing through the empty house. "Can you come here for a minute?" Her son appeared in the doorway, his t-shirt smudged with dirt from his work in the barn. "What's up, Mom?" "Look at this," Maria said, pointing to her discovery. "Does that look like a trapdoor to you?" Ethan knelt beside her, his adolescent cynicism momentarily replaced by genuine interest. "Definitely not normal flooring. See how the boards inside that rectangle are cut differently? And these are screwed down, not nailed like the others." Together, they cleared away more dirt, revealing antique brass fixtures at each corner of the rectangle. What had initially appeared to be decorative elements were actually elaborate hinges and a recessed handle designed to lie flush with the floor when closed. Should we open it? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, It means a lot to us. Now back to the story, Ethan asked, already reaching for the multi-tool he carried in his pocket. Maria hesitated, years of single motherhood having taught her caution. Let me get a flashlight first. And maybe we should have Sophia come in too. She'll never forgive us if we find something cool without her. Within minutes, the family was gathered around the mysterious trapdoor. Using his tool, Ethan carefully worked at the recessed handle until it popped up with a metallic groan. Decades of disuse had stiffened the mechanism, but it was remarkably well preserved, almost as if it had been intentionally maintained even as the rest of the house fell into ruin. "On three," Maria said, gripping the handle alongside her son. "1, 2, 3. They pulled, muscles straining against years of resistance. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like a sigh, the trapdoor lifted, revealing a perfect square of darkness below. Maria directed her flashlight into the opening, illuminating a wooden ladder descending into what appeared to be a small room beneath the floor. Unlike the dust-choked space above, this hidden chamber showed signs of meticulous preservation. The air that wafted up carried a strange mixture of scents, paper, metal, and something chemical that Maria couldn't identify. "Whoa!" Sophia whispered, peering over the edge. "It's like a secret hideout." "Stay back," Maria cautioned, maternal instinct overtaking curiosity. "Let me check if it's safe first." The ladder creaked but held firm as Maria descended into the hidden room. Her flashlight revealed a space approximately 10 feet square, with walls lined in some type of metal sheeting. Unlike the haphazard decay above, this room had been deliberately sealed and preserved. A small desk occupied one corner, its surface covered with papers secured by paperweights. Metal filing cabinets lined one wall, their surfaces free of dust. Despite the decades of abandonment, most striking was a large safe dominating the opposite wall, its dark green surface emblazoned with an official-looking seal that Maria didn't recognize. "Mum, what is all this stuff?" Ethan called from above, his voice tinged with both excitement and apprehension. "I'm not sure," Maria replied, her flashlight beam catching on framed photographs hung on the metal walls. The images showed men in military uniforms standing before various government buildings. Some faces had been carefully blacked out with what appeared to be permanent marker. Dates in the corners ranged from 1943 to 1947. As Maria moved deeper into the room, her foot struck something that skittered across the floor with a metallic sound. Directing her light downward, she discovered a small key that had been dislodged. From beneath the desk, it was brass, intricately cut, with numbers stamped into its head. 7/04, 1945. A chill ran down Maria's spine that had nothing to do with the cool air in the underground chamber. Whatever this room contained had been deliberately hidden and preserved. The dates on the photographs, the military connections, the carefully maintained security all suggested something far beyond a simple storage cellar or private study. Maria's discovery came at a pivotal moment for Pinewood itself. The small town had been declining for decades, losing younger residents to larger cities with better job prospects. Main Street featured more vacant storefronts than active businesses, and the local school had been consolidated with neighboring districts after enrollment dropped below sustainable levels. Property values had plummeted, making the area attractive to outside developers looking to build vacation homes for wealthy urbanites seeking mountain getaways. Robert Daniels, CEO of Mountain Vista Properties, had been particularly aggressive in acquiring land around Pinewood. His company specialized in transforming distressed rural communities into upscale resort destinations. For months, he had been pressuring the county commissioners to rezone large portions of the valley, including the area surrounding the Holloway Ranch. His vision included a golf course, luxury condominiums, and an artificial lake, amenities that would forever alter the character of the struggling town. Maria knew none of this as she carefully examined the contents of the hidden room. Her focus narrowed to the documents spread across the desk, papers covered in technical diagrams, letters bearing official government letterheads, and maps marked with locations across the western United States. Many pages featured a distinctive stamp reading Manhattan Engineer District, a name that stirred some distant memory from her college history classes. With trembling hands, Maria gathered several documents and tucked them into her pocket before climbing back up the ladder. Her children's eager faces greeted her as she emerged, both bursting with questions about her discovery. "There's a whole room down there," she explained, helping Ethan secure the trapdoor to prevent Sophia from attempting her own exploration. "It looks like some kind of office or records room. I'm not sure what it was used for, but it seems important." "Can we go down there too?" Sophia pleaded, her imagination clearly racing with possibilities. "Not yet, honey. I need to make sure it's safe first, and I need to figure out exactly what we've found." That evening, after the children had gone to bed, Maria spread the documents across the kitchen table, using battery-powered lanterns to illuminate her impromptu research. As she carefully examined each page, the significance of her discovery began to dawn on her. The papers contained references to uranium processing, radiation safety protocols, and something called the device. Letters between Theodore Holloway, Jr. and various military officials suggested that the ranch had been used as a secure location for sensitive meetings related to what they referred to only as the project. Most disturbing were handwritten notes describing security concerns about foreign infiltration and information containment. Several pages outlined elaborate protocols for destroying documents in case of emergency. Maria's blood ran cold as she realized what the hidden room might represent: a secure facility related to the development of the atomic bomb during World War II, the Manhattan Project. That was the connection her mind had been reaching for, the massive secret government program that had developed the first nuclear weapons. But why would a remote Montana ranch have connections to one of the most classified operations in American history? Sleep eluded Maria that night as she pondered the implications of her discovery. If the documents were authentic, they might have significant historical value, but they might also contain information that remained sensitive even after nearly 8 decades. The question of ownership troubled her as well. Did these materials belong to her as the property owner, to the Holloway family, or to the government? By morning, Maria had made her decision. After getting the children off to their newly enrolled school in Pinewood, she drove to the small sheriff's office on Main Street. Sheriff Tom Wilson, a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and a perpetually concerned expression, looked up in surprise as Maria entered. "Mrs. Lawson, right? The new owner of the Holloway place?" He set down his coffee mug. "Everything all right out there?" "I'm not sure," Maria replied honestly, placing one of the less technical documents on his desk. "I found something yesterday that I think you should see." Sheriff Wilson's expression transformed as he examined the letterhead and contents of the page. "Where exactly did you find this, Mrs. Lawson?" Maria described the hidden room and its contents, watching as the sheriff's professional concern deepened into something more serious. "I'm going to need to make some calls," he said, reaching for his phone. "This isn't something I'm equipped to handle on my own." Within hours, Maria found herself sitting in the sheriff's office with 2 individuals who had arrived in an unmarked government vehicle. Agent David Foster introduced himself as a specialist from the FBI's Historical Artifacts Division, while his colleague, Agent Sarah Chen, was described as a consultant on classified historical materials. Their polite demeanor couldn't mask the intensity of their interest in Maria's discovery. "Mrs. Lawson," Agent Foster began, "what you've found may be significantly important to American history. Would you be willing to show us the location?" By early afternoon, the Holloway Ranch had been transformed into an impromptu federal operation. A team of agents in plain clothes established a perimeter around the property, while specialized equipment was brought in through the back roads to avoid attention from curious neighbors. Maria watched from the porch, her children beside her, as Agent Chen supervised the careful documentation of the hidden room's contents. "Mom, are we in trouble?" Sophia whispered, gripping Maria's hand tightly. "No, sweetheart. We just found something that's important to history. These people are here to help us understand what it is." Agent Foster approached the family, his expression carefully neutral. "Mrs. Lawson, we've made an initial assessment of the materials. I believe we need to have a more in-depth conversation about what you've discovered." Inside the kitchen, Foster spread photographs taken from the underground room across the table. The Holloway Ranch was apparently used as a secure meeting location for Manhattan Project officials, traveling between Chicago, Los Alamos, and the uranium processing facilities in the West. Theodore Holloway Jr. was a security liaison for the Army Corps of Engineers, tasked with maintaining this safe house and facilitating classified communications. "Was this common knowledge in Pinewood?" Maria asked, struggling to reconcile this revelation with the ranch's dilapidated present. "State, absolutely not," Agent Chen interjected. "The entire operation was compartmentalized. Local residents would have only known that Holloway worked for the government in some capacity. The facility beneath your house was designed to leave no trace in public records." "Then why was it abandoned?" Ethan asked, his teenage curiosity overcoming his usual reserve around strangers. "If it was so important, why just leave everything down there?" The agents exchanged glances before Foster responded carefully. "That's actually one of the most intriguing aspects of your discovery, son. According to the last dated documents, we've found this facility should have been decommissioned and cleared out in 1949. All materials should have been transferred to secure government archives. The fact that it wasn't suggests something potentially very significant." As the investigation continued into the evening, Maria realized that her impulsive $600 purchase had irrevocably changed her family's circumstances. Agent Foster confirmed that as the legal property owner, she would be entitled to certain considerations regarding her discovery. The government would need to remove classified materials, but historical items without security implications could potentially remain with Maria, their historical value far exceeding anything she could have imagined. Most immediately relevant was the temporary housing arrangement the FBI offered while their work continued. A comfortable rental house in town, with utilities paid for at least a month, would allow the family to avoid the primitive conditions of the ranch while still remaining close by. "We understand this is disruptive," Agent Chen explained, her tone sympathetic. "But the historical significance of what you've found can't be overstated. You've potentially uncovered materials that fill a gap in our understanding of one of America's most classified historical operations." That night, as Maria tucked Sophia into bed in their temporary housing, her daughter looked up with wide eyes. "Are we going to be famous now, Mom?" Maria smiled, smoothing her daughter's hair. "I don't think famous is the right word, sweetheart. But I think our lives are going to be different in ways we never expected." As the investigation at the Holloway Ranch intensified over the following days, word inevitably spread through the small community of Pinewood. Locals who had pitied Maria's seemingly foolish purchase now regarded her with newfound curiosity and respect. Speculation ran rampant about what exactly had been discovered at the old ranch, with theories ranging from mundane, buried treasure to outlandish, alien artifacts. The truth, as it emerged through careful documentation by the FBI team, was far more historically significant than even the most imaginative rumors. The hidden facility had served not only as a secure communications post during the Manhattan Project, but had continued operating well into the early Cold War. Documents discovered in the locked filing cabinets revealed that Theodore Holloway, Jr. had been involved in counterintelligence operations, targeting suspected Soviet attempts to infiltrate America's nuclear program. Most stunning was the discovery that came when agents finally opened the large safe using the key Maria had found. Inside were technological schematics and prototype designs for radiation detection equipment decades ahead of what was publicly known to exist in that era. These innovations had apparently been developed by a brilliant physicist whose contributions had been deliberately erased from official Manhattan Project histories due to security concerns about his background. For Maria, the whirlwind of federal activity and historical revelation took on deeply personal significance when Agent Foster brought an elderly visitor to meet her. James Cooper, the 87-year-old grandson of Theodore Holloway Jr., had been located by the FBI and flown in from his retirement community in Arizona. "My grandfather never spoke about his war work," Cooper explained, as he sat with Maria on the porch of their temporary housing. "We knew he had done something important, but the details died with him in 1971. I can't tell you what it means to finally understand the contribution he made." The warm afternoon sun cast long shadows across the temporary housing as Maria sat, with James Cooper, absorbing the extraordinary history of the Holloway family. The elderly man's hands trembled slightly as he pulled faded photographs from a worn leather portfolio. "This is my grandfather with General Groves," he explained, pointing to a stern-looking man in military uniform standing beside Theodore Holloway, Jr. "It was taken somewhere in New Mexico, 1944. No one in our family knew what he was doing there until now." Maria studied the photograph, trying to reconcile the dignified figure with the dilapidated ranch she'd purchased. "Did you ever visit the ranch when you were young?" "Only twice," James replied, his weathered face softening with the memory. "Summer of '52 and again for grandmother's funeral in '59. By then, grandfather had become different. Watchful, paranoid, my mother called it. He'd installed extra locks on every door and wouldn't allow photographs to be taken on the property. He shuffled through his collection, producing a small black and white image of a young boy standing beside a stern-faced older man on the very porch where Maria had first stood just weeks ago. That's me, age 12, with grandfather. It was the last time I saw the ranch until today. The FBI agents mentioned that your grandfather continued working on something even after the war ended," Maria prompted gently. James nodded, glancing toward the driveway where Agent Foster was speaking quietly into his phone. "According to what they've told me, grandfather was involved in something called Operation Eclipse, a counterintelligence program tracking Soviet attempts to infiltrate America's nuclear secrets. The ranch served as a dead drop and secure meeting location, far from the obvious government facilities that were under surveillance." Maria considered this as she watched her children playing in the yard with the neighbor's dog. Ethan was showing uncharacteristic patience, helping Sophia throw a tennis ball while ensuring she didn't wander too close to the street. The past weeks had matured him in subtle ways, his initial resentment about moving to Pinewood transforming into a protective pride about their accidental place in history. "What happens to the ranch now?" Maria asked, voicing the question that had been keeping her awake at night. James sighed, replacing the photographs in his portfolio with careful precision. "Agent Foster says that's largely up to you. Legally, the property and structures belong to you. The historical artifacts and documents related to government operations are more complicated. Some will likely be removed to National Archives, but there's talk of establishing a historical preservation agreement that would maintain the site's integrity." The conversation was interrupted as Agent Sarah Chen approached, carrying a leather-bound journal. "Mrs. Lawson," "Mr. Cooper, we found something you should see." Chen opened the journal to a page marked with an acid-free paper tab. This appears to be Theodore Holloway's personal log from January 1946. The entry details concerns about unauthorized access to the underground facility. Maria leaned forward to read the careful handwriting. January 17th, 1946. Confirmed disturbance. In secondary filing system, documents regarding K-25 safety protocols relocated by unauthorized personnel. Local interference unlikely. Security measures being enhanced as per Protocol Theta. EM notified via secure channel will maintain heightened observation until further instructions received. "Who was EM?" Maria asked, noting the initials. "We believe it refers to Enrico Marquez, one of the security coordinators for domestic Manhattan project sites," Chen explained. "What's significant is that this matches a period when the FBI was investigating potential leaks of classified information. Your discovery is filling gaps in a historical record that has remained incomplete for decades." As Chen returned to the ongoing documentation work at the ranch, James turned to Maria with heightened interest. "You've done a remarkable thing, Mrs. Lawson. Many families connected to the Manhattan Project never learned the full extent of their loved ones' contributions due to security classifications. You've helped unlock not just my family's history, but potentially dozens of others." The magnitude of the discovery was underscored that evening when additional FBI personnel arrived from Washington, including specialists in historical document preservation and radiological safety. Maria watched from the kitchen window of their temporary housing as equipment was unloaded from unmarked vans. Specialized scanning technology, environmental monitoring devices, and materials clearly designed for the safe transport of delicate, historical artifacts. Agent Foster stopped by after the evening briefing, his usually composed demeanor showing signs of genuine excitement. "Mrs. Lawson, I wanted to update you personally. We've confirmed that several documents in the collection refer to something called the Transmutation Initiative, apparently an early research program exploring peaceful applications of atomic energy that was discontinued in 1948. The scientific community has long suspected such a program existed, but until now, no definitive evidence had surfaced. Is that why everything was left hidden instead of being archived properly?" Maria asked. Foster nodded. "We believe so. According to communications we've decoded, your Theodore Holloway received orders to secure, rather than transfer, certain documents when the program was terminated. The implication is that someone wanted this particular research preserved but not officially acknowledged." In the living room, Ethan was helping Sophia with her math homework, their voices a comforting backdrop to the increasingly surreal situation. Maria felt a surge of protective concern. Their lives had been disrupted enough by the divorce and subsequent financial struggles. Would this discovery bring stability or further chaos? "What does this mean for us practically, Agent Foster?" "My main concern is providing a stable home for my children." Foster's expression softened. "I understand completely. I've been authorized to inform you that the historical significance of your property qualifies it for several preservation programs that come with substantial financial support. Additionally, the recovered materials include items of considerable value that would remain your property as the legal owner of the site." He hesitated before continuing. "There's also significant academic interest. 3 major universities have already approached us about research access, which typically involves fees paid to the property owner. While I can't promise specifics, yet it's clear that your $600 investment will yield returns that could transform your family's circumstances." Maria felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief at the financial implications, pride in contributing to historical understanding, but also a nagging concern about the attention their discovery would inevitably bring. "How much of this will become public?" she asked. "I don't want my children becoming some kind of local sideshow." "That's entirely within your control," Foster assured her. Many historically significant sites maintain private ownership with limited structured public access. Your privacy can be protected while still allowing for appropriate historical research. As Foster departed, Maria stepped onto the porch of their temporary home, gazing in the direction of the Holloway Ranch. Although not visible from town, she could picture it clearly. The weathered buildings standing sentinel over secrets that had lain dormant for generations until her family's arrival. There was symmetry there that wasn't lost on her. A single mother desperate for security had unknowingly secured the legacy of another family's service to national security. The following morning brought an unexpected visitor to their temporary residence. Robert Daniels of Mountain Vista Properties arrived in a gleaming SUV, his casual designer clothing failing to disguise his calculating demeanor. Maria received him cautiously on the porch, declining his request to speak privately indoors. "Mrs. Lawson," he began with practiced charm, "I understand you've made quite the discovery at the old Holloway place. The whole town is talking about it." "Word travels fast in Pinewood," Maria replied neutrally, noticing how Daniels kept glancing toward the road, as if concerned about being seen. "I'll be direct," he continued, lowering his voice despite the empty street. "My company has plans for developing that entire area into a premium resort community. Your property is a critical piece of our master plan. I'm prepared to offer you $100,000 cash for the ranch. That's more than 160 times what you paid just a few weeks ago." Maria studied him carefully, recognizing the barely concealed urgency behind his practiced smile. "That's a generous offer, Mr. Daniels, but I'm not currently interested in selling." A flash of frustration crossed his face before he recovered his composure. "Mrs. Lawson, Maria, you have to understand the opportunity here. That property requires hundreds of thousands in repairs just to be safely habitable. The historical novelty is interesting, certainly, but ultimately, you have two children to consider. Their future could be secured with one signature." "Their future is precisely what I'm considering," Maria replied, her teacher's patience masking growing irritation. "Thank you for your offer, but my answer remains no." As Daniels reluctantly departed, Maria noticed Agent Chen watching from her unmarked car across the street. The agent approached once the developer's vehicle had turned the corner. "Robert Daniels has been making aggressive moves throughout the county," Chen commented. "His company has acquired over 2,000 acres surrounding Pinewood in the past 18 months. He seemed unusually interested in a property he previously considered worthless," Maria observed. Chen's expression remained professionally neutral. "We've noticed similar patterns around other historically significant sites. Once federal interest becomes apparent, certain developers move quickly to secure adjacent properties. The historical designation often increases surrounding land values substantially." "Do you think he knows what was found in the hidden room?" Maria asked, suddenly concerned about her children's safety. "The specific contents remain classified," Chen assured her, "but the presence of federal investigators naturally generates speculation. We'll maintain security at the ranch until all sensitive materials are properly documented and secured." Throughout the day, Maria found herself pondering Daniels's unexpected offer. $100,000 would indeed solve many immediate problems, enough for a modest home without the overwhelming renovation challenges the ranch presented. Yet something felt fundamentally wrong about relinquishing their discovery so quickly, as if they would be abandoning a responsibility that had been entrusted to them through an unlikely chain of circumstances. That evening, While the children were engrossed in a board game, Maria slipped away to call her sister in Seattle. Catherine had always been her sounding board, the pragmatic counterpoint to Maria's more intuitive decision-making. "Let me get this straight," Catherine said after hearing the condensed version of recent events. "You accidentally bought a historical gold mine. The FBI is treating you like you've discovered the Holy Grail, and some developer is throwing money at you to walk away." "That about sums it up," Maria confirmed, smiling despite her stress. "And you're actually considering his offer? Maria, think about what you're sitting on. If the government historical people are this excited, the property's value will only increase. Not to mention the educational opportunity for the kids. They're literally living inside a history lesson." "But the practicalities are overwhelming," Maria countered. "The house needs everything. Plumbing, electrical, structural repairs. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars I don't have." Catherine's sigh was audible through the phone. "Then talk to the historical preservation people. There are grants, tax incentives, all kinds of programs for properties with genuine historical significance. Don't sell to the first opportunist who comes knocking." After ending the call, Maria found Agent Foster in their temporary driveway, conversing quietly with a newly arrived colleague. She approached hesitantly, not wanting to interrupt official business. "Mrs. Lawson," Foster acknowledged her with a nod. "Allow me to introduce Dr. Helen Parker from the National Historical Preservation Trust. She's been authorized to discuss options for your property." Dr. Parker, a trim woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair and intelligent eyes, extended her hand. "I've been reviewing the preliminary reports on your discovery, Mrs. Lawson. To say it's significant would be a dramatic understatement." Inside, over cups of tea at the kitchen table, Dr. Parker outlined possibilities that made Maria's earlier concerns seem increasingly manageable. The Trust specializes in supporting privately owned properties of exceptional historical value, Parker explained, opening a folder filled with photographs of immaculately restored historic homes. "The Holloway Ranch would qualify for our highest tier of support, grants covering up to 70% of preservation costs, technical assistance from restoration specialists, and ongoing partnership for maintenance." "And what's the catch?" Maria asked, her years of financial hardship having taught her healthy skepticism. Dr. Parker smiled appreciatively at the direct question. "In exchange, you would agree to maintain the property's historical integrity, specifically preserving the underground facility and allowing scheduled research access. You would retain full ownership and residential rights, with certain portions of the property designated as historically protected." "And my children, how would this affect them?" "They would be living in a professionally restored historic home, with the unique opportunity to be directly connected to a significant piece of American history." Many families in our program find that children develop exceptional interest in historical and scientific subjects through this immersive experience. The conversation continued as Dr. Parker detailed specific programs available. Emergency stabilization funds that could address immediate structural concerns, educational partnerships that could benefit Ethan and Sophia, even employment opportunities for Maria herself as the site's primary historical interpreter. "You're offering me a job?" Maria asked, surprised by this unexpected aspect. "Many private owners of historical sites serve as their primary caretakers and interpreters," Parker confirmed. "Your background in education makes you exceptionally qualified. The stipend would supplement any other income, helping ensure the property remains within your family's care long-term." As Dr. Parker departed with promises of formal proposals to follow, Maria felt the weight of decision-making pressing heavily upon her. She stepped outside to clear her head, finding Ethan sitting on the porch steps, his expression pensive in the gathering twilight. "Everything okay?" she asked, settling beside him. He shrugged with typical teenage restraint before surprising her with unexpected insight. "That developer guy who came by today, he reminds me of Dad, always looking for the angle, you know, like everything's just something to be used." Maria remained silent, allowing him space to continue. "But what we found, it's not just stuff, is it? It's part of something bigger." He gestured vaguely toward the distant mountains. "Those people who built that secret room, they were protecting something they thought was important enough to hide for decades. Doesn't seem right to just let some resort developer bulldoze over it." The simple wisdom in her son's observation crystallized Maria's thinking. Throughout her adult life, circumstances had often forced her to relinquish control, her education interrupted by marriage, her teaching career suspended by motherhood, her financial stability shattered by divorce. The Holloway Ranch represented something she hadn't dared hope for, the opportunity to build something lasting on her own terms. The decision settled within her with surprising certainty. They would stay. They would preserve what Theodore Holloway had deemed worth protecting. They would build their future by honoring the past. The following day brought unexpected reinforcement for her decision when Sheriff Wilson stopped by, his official vehicle parked conspicuously in the driveway. "Thought you should know," he said without preamble. "Daniels has been making some interesting moves since your discovery hit the rumor mill. He's filed expedited permit requests for extensive excavation work on properties adjacent to yours, citing geological surveys as the reason." "Does that seem unusual?" Maria asked, noting the sheriff's concerned expression. "Let's just say his previous development work involved minimal ground disturbance, focus on views, natural features, that sort of thing. Now suddenly he's planning major earth-moving operations precisely when historical artifacts are discovered nearby." Wilson adjusted his hat meaningfully. "I've served in Pinewood 30 years, Mrs. Lawson. Coincidences that convenient make my neck itch." The sheriff's suspicions were echoed later that afternoon when Agent Chen requested a formal interview, recording Maria's account of Daniels's unexpected offer. "We're establishing a timeline of external interest in your property," Chen explained. "There are patterns here that align with previous cases involving attempted acquisition of historically significant sites. By evening, the increased security presence around both their temporary housing and the ranch itself was unmistakable. Additional agents had arrived, maintaining discreet but vigilant observation. The children noticed the change, prompting questions Maria struggled to answer without causing unnecessary alarm. "Are we in danger, Mom?" Sophia asked as Maria tucked her into bed, her young face serious in the lamplight. "No, sweetheart. The FBI people are just being extra careful because what we found is important to history. It's like having special guards for a museum exhibit." The explanation satisfied Sophia, but Ethan proved more perceptive when Maria checked on him later. "It's about that developer, isn't it? He wants what we found." Maria considered deflecting but opted for measured honesty. "Some people might be too interested in the historical artifacts for the wrong reasons, but Agent Foster and his team are making sure everything is properly protected. That's their job. And our job is to take care of the ranch," Ethan concluded with unexpected maturity, "since we're the ones who found the secret room." "That's exactly right," Maria agreed, recognizing the growing sense of purpose that had begun to transform her formerly disaffected teenager. A thunderstorm rolled through Pinewood shortly after midnight, the distant rumble of thunder masking the sound that initially woke Maria from uneasy sleep. A car engine quickly silenced. somewhere too close to their temporary home. She lay, still, listening intently, years of single motherhood having honed her awareness of potential threats. There it was again, the unmistakable sound of footsteps on wet gravel, deliberate and slow, circling toward the back of the house. Maria slipped from bed and moved silently to the window, careful to remain hidden behind the curtain as she peered into the rain-streaked darkness. A flashlight beam briefly illuminated the side yard before quickly extinguishing. Heart pounding, Maria reached for her phone to call Agent Foster when headlights suddenly flooded the street outside. An unmarked vehicle pulled alongside the suspicious figure, and two agents emerged with practiced efficiency. Within moments, they had detained a man whose expensive rain jacket seemed incongruously paired with mud-covered hiking boots. From her vantage point, Maria could see Agent Foster approaching the house. She met him at the door before he could knock, conscious of the children sleeping upstairs. "Mrs. Lawson," Foster greeted her quietly. "Sorry for the disturbance. We've apprehended an individual attempting to access your residence. Preliminary identification suggests he's employed by a private security firm with connections to Mountain Vista Properties. Daniels sent someone to break in." Maria struggled to process this escalation. "We can't confirm that connection yet," Foster replied professionally. "But given recent developments, we're implementing additional security measures, effective immediately. A team will remain on site here, and we're expediting the secure transfer of the most sensitive materials from the ranch." The remainder of the night passed without further incident, but sleep eluded Maria. By dawn, she had made another decision, one that surprised even herself with its clarity and conviction. After ensuring the children were settled with morning activities, she requested a private meeting with Foster, Chen, and Dr. Parker. The three professionals gathered in the small dining room, expressions ranging from curious to concerned. "I want to accelerate the preservation process," Maria stated without preamble. "Whatever paperwork is needed, whatever agreements must be signed, I want it done immediately. The Holloway Ranch and everything it contains needs official protection, not just temporary security." Dr. Parker nodded approvingly. "We can initiate emergency historical designation procedures. Under the circumstances, I believe we could have preliminary protections in place within 72 hours. I also want a restraining order against Robert Daniels and anyone associated with Mountain Vista Properties," Maria continued, surprising even Agent Foster with her assertiveness. "Last night's incident confirms they're willing to cross legal boundaries. I need to ensure my children's safety." Foster exchanged glances with Chen before responding. "We can coordinate with local law enforcement on that front. Sheriff Wilson has already expressed similar concerns about Daniel's activities." "There's one more thing," Maria added, her voice steady despite the boldness of what she was about to propose. "The historical materials indicate that Theodore Holloway continued his security work well beyond the official end of the Manhattan Project. I believe there may be additional hidden locations on the property that we haven't yet discovered." This caught the full attention of all three professionals. "What makes you say that?" Chen asked carefully. Maria produced copies of journal entries she had been studying. These references to secondary containment and alternate preservation suggest Holloway created multiple secure locations. The facility we've found may only be the most obvious one. Foster studied the documents with renewed interest. "You may be right. This could explain why certain expected materials haven't been located in the initial site. We should expand our survey of the property immediately." The meeting concluded with clear action items for each participant: legal protections, to initiate security measures to enhance, and a comprehensive property survey to plan. As the professionals departed to implement these decisions, Maria experienced an unfamiliar sensation: the power of directing her own circumstances rather than merely responding to them. She found Ethan and Sophia in the backyard, collaborating on a detailed drawing of the Holloway Ranch that incorporated both its current dilapidated state and imaginative renovations. "We're planning our home," Sophia explained, pointing proudly to a colorful garden she had added beside the porch. "And security upgrades," Ethan added more pragmatically, indicating reinforced windows and improved lighting around the property. Perimeter. Maria studied their work, touched by how quickly they had embraced the ranch as their future. "It's going to take a lot of work," she cautioned gently. Sophia looked up with complete confidence. "But we get to do it together, and we'll be the family that protects the secret history place." "The historical preservation site," Ethan corrected, with the seriousness of a curator twice his age. Maria laughed, feeling genuine joy breaking through weeks of stress and uncertainty. "Yes, we will. We're going to preserve something important, not just for ourselves, but for everyone." The day unfolded with increasing activity as additional FBI personnel arrived to implement enhanced security protocols. Maria observed with growing confidence as Dr. Parker coordinated with historical preservation specialists, establishing preliminary documentation for emergency historical designation. The wheels of official protection were turning, gradually securing what Maria had impulsively purchased just weeks earlier. By mid-afternoon, Sheriff Wilson arrived with formal notification that a temporary restraining order had been granted against Robert Daniels and all Mountain Vista Properties personnel. The sheriff's satisfaction was evident as he delivered this news. "Judge Crawford doesn't issue these lightly," he explained, but the attempted nighttime entry combined with Daniel's unusual financial interest in previously worthless property gave us solid grounds. He's required to maintain a minimum distance of 500 yards from both your temporary residence and the ranch property until the hearing next week. As the sheriff departed, James Cooper's taxi arrived from his hotel in town. The elderly man had spent the morning reviewing additional documents recovered from the hidden room, providing valuable context based on family recollections. "Mrs. Lawson," he called as he approached the porch with surprising energy for his age. "I believe I can help with your theory about additional hidden locations. My grandfather was known for his elaborate security systems, even in our family home in Denver. He designed things with redundancies, always multiple layers of protection." Inside, Cooper spread a worn family photo album across the kitchen table. "Look at this image from 1947. See the background behind my grandmother? That's the barn at the ranch, but there's something unusual about the foundation stones." Maria studied the photograph, noting the distinctive pattern of darker stones, creating what initially appeared to be a decorative border. "They're arranged in a specific sequence." "Exactly," Cooper confirmed. "My grandfather was fascinated by codes and patterns. In our Denver home, he used a similar stone pattern to mark the location of a hidden safe where he kept family valuables. I'd wager that pattern at the barn is significant." This information was immediately relayed to Agent Foster, who authorized an expanded investigation of the barn structure. By early evening, the results vindicated Maria's intuition. Ground-penetrating radar identified an anomalous space beneath the barn's southern foundation, approximately 12 feet square and accessible through what appeared to be a disguised access point in the stone foundation. "We'll begin careful exploration tomorrow," Foster informed Maria as technicians packed away their equipment for the night. Preliminary readings suggest another preserved space, potentially even better sealed than the first. Whatever Theodore Holloway wanted to protect, he took extraordinary measures to ensure its survival. As twilight settled over Pinewood, Maria sat on the porch, watching her children play catch with one of the younger FBI agents who had been assigned to family security. The normalcy of the scene, children laughing, the rhythmic thump of a baseball, hitting gloves, contrasted sharply with the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them to this moment. A text message from her sister Catherine broke her reverie. "Saw something on the news about historical discovery in Montana. Is that you?" Maria smiled, typing back, "Long story. We bought a piece of history for $600 and found ourselves keeping secrets for a generation that saved the world. I'll call tomorrow. It's better than anything I could have imagined." She paused before adding a final thought. "For the first time since the divorce, I feel like we're exactly where we're supposed to be." The morning dawned clear and cold as Maria stepped from the temporary housing, her breath forming small clouds in the crisp Montana air. The early sunlight glinted off frost-covered grass, transforming the modest yard into a field of diamonds. 1 week had passed since she had firmly rejected Robert Daniels' offer, and the subsequent days had unfolded with dizzying intensity. She clutched her coffee mug tighter, watching as the FBI's forensic archaeology team arrived for another day of careful excavation at the barn site. The discovery beneath the barn foundation had proven even more significant than the original. Hidden room, a second chamber, 3 times larger than the first, contained not just documents, but actual prototype equipment related to the mysterious transmutation initiative that Theodore Holloway had been tasked with protecting. "Morning, Mrs. Lawson," called Dr. Helen Parker as she emerged from an official vehicle, her silver hair tucked beneath a practical wool hat. "We've got the preliminary preservation agreement ready for your review today." Maria nodded, gesturing toward the house. "Come in for coffee. The children just left for school." Inside the warmth of the kitchen, Dr. Parker spread documents across the table while Maria poured coffee for them both. The older woman had quickly become a steadying presence amid the whirlwind of federal activity, her practical approach to historical preservation balancing the sometimes overwhelming security concerns expressed by Agent Foster and his team. "This outlines the terms of the National Historical Trust's involvement," Parker explained, pointing to key sections of the agreement. "The grant provides immediate funding for structural stabilization of both the house and barn, plus comprehensive restoration to be completed within 18 months. You'll retain full ownership and residential rights, with designated areas protected for historical significance." Maria scanned the document, focusing on the financial details. The numbers were staggering: nearly $850,000 in restoration funding, a $60,000 annual stipend for site maintenance and interpretation, plus educational grants for both children that would fully fund their future college expenses. "This seems too generous," Maria said cautiously. "What's the catch?" Dr. Parker smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "The catch is that you've stumbled upon one of the most significant Manhattan Project-related discoveries in the past 50 years. The scientific and historical communities are falling over themselves to support this preservation. Your property represents a unique window into both the technological and human dimensions of one of America's most classified endeavors." Maria sipped her coffee, still processing the dramatic reversal of their circumstances. Just 2 months ago, she'd been working double shifts at the Pinewood cafe, calculating whether she could afford both rent and her children's school supplies. Now she was being offered resources beyond anything she could have imagined, all because she had purchased a dilapidated ranch that no one else wanted. "What about the second chamber they found yesterday?" she asked. Agent Foster seemed particularly excited about something they discovered there. Dr. Parker leaned forward, her voice lowering slightly, though they were alone in the house. "The equipment they've recovered appears to be prototype technology for medical applications of radioactive isotopes, cancer treatment methods that weren't publicly developed until decades later. The scientific community is, well, buzzing would be an understatement." A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Agent Sarah Chen entered, her professional demeanor slightly disrupted by what appeared to be genuine excitement. "Mrs. Lawson, Dr. Parker, we've identified additional materials in the barn chamber that require immediate attention. Would you both be willing to come to the site?" The short drive to the Holloway Ranch revealed a dramatically transformed property. FBI vehicles lined the long driveway, while specially equipped trailers housed scientific equipment and security monitoring systems. The barn itself had been enclosed within a temporary structure resembling a scientific cleanroom, protecting the excavation from both weather and unauthorized observation. Inside the protective shell, Maria followed Chen and Parker down a newly constructed ramp that led to the opened foundation. The original hidden entrance, a cleverly disguised sliding stone in the foundation wall, had been fully exposed, revealing a passageway reinforced with materials that had preserved the contents for nearly 8 decades. At the bottom of the ramp, Agent Foster stood conferring with a team of specialists whose protective gear suggested they were handling potentially sensitive materials. He looked up as the women approached, gesturing them toward a viewing area safely distant from the recovery operation. "Mrs. Lawson, we've uncovered something extraordinary," Foster began, his normally measured tone betraying rare excitement. "What appears to be a comprehensive research archive, documenting advancements that occurred within the classified portions of the Manhattan Project, but were never publicly acknowledged." On a specially prepared table, technicians were carefully photographing and cataloging a series of leather-bound journals, each marked with the same distinctive symbol, a stylized atom with unusual markings that Maria now recognized as Theodore Holloway's personal cipher. These contained detailed notes on medical applications of atomic research, Foster continued. Early experiments in targeted radiation therapy, isotope production for diagnostic purposes, even preliminary studies on radiation protection that wouldn't become standard for decades. Theodore Holloway wasn't just hiding this information. He was deliberately preserving it for future discovery. Dr. Parker examined the materials with professional reverence. "This changes our understanding of the Manhattan Project's scope. The public narrative has always focused exclusively on weapons development, but this suggests a parallel effort toward peaceful applications that was deliberately kept separate from military objectives." A technician approached, carefully carrying a metal document box that had just been unsealed. "Agent Foster, you should see this immediately." The box contained a single envelope, sealed with wax that bore Theodore Holloway's distinctive mark. Written across the front in bold, careful handwriting were the words, "To be opened only when humanity is ready for the responsibility it contains." Foster carefully broke the seal, extracting a handwritten letter dated April 4th, 1962. The group gathered around as he read Theodore Holloway's words aloud. "To whoever discovers this repository, I have dedicated my life to protecting knowledge that could transform or destroy our civilization depending on the wisdom with which it is applied." The Transmutation Initiative represented mankind's first steps toward understanding energy at its most fundamental level, beyond mere atomic fission or fusion. As security chief for domestic Manhattan Project activities, I witnessed both humanity's greatest potential and its darkest impulses. When the initiative was officially terminated in 1948, I received orders to destroy all records of its existence. Instead, I chose to preserve this knowledge in the hope that future generations might approach it with greater wisdom than my own. The accompanying materials contain research that would have dramatically altered the course of medicine, energy production, and materials science. It was suppressed not because it failed, but because it succeeded too well, threatening established power structures and economic systems that were unprepared for such radical transformation. I do not know when this archive will be discovered, nor what world will receive it. I can only hope that time has granted the perspective necessary to use this knowledge responsibly. With faith in humanity's better nature, Theodore Holloway, Jr. A profound silence followed as the letter's implications settled over the group. Maria found herself unexpectedly moved by the trust that had been placed in whoever might eventually discover this hidden legacy. Through random chance and desperate circumstances, that responsibility had fallen to her family. This isn't just a historical curiosity, Dr. Parker finally said. This is living research that could still have significant scientific applications. Foster nodded, carefully returning the letter to its protective envelope, which is precisely why the security protocols around this site remain essential. Until we've fully catalogued and assessed the scientific content, we need to maintain controlled access. As the professionals returned to their careful documentation work, Maria wandered to the barn entrance, needing a moment to process the magnitude of what they had discovered. Standing in the doorway, she gazed across the property that was slowly transforming from a desperate last resort into something that felt increasingly like destiny. The distant sound of a vehicle approaching drew her attention. Sheriff Wilson's patrol car appeared on the winding driveway, moving with unusual urgency. Maria stepped outside to meet him as he parked beside the FBI vehicles. Mrs. Lawson, the sheriff acknowledged her with a quick nod, his expression unusually serious. Is Agent Foster available? We've got a situation developing that he needs to know about immediately. Within minutes, Foster, Chen, and Dr. Parker had joined them outside the barn, listening as Sheriff Wilson outlined a troubling development. One of my deputies spotted unusual activity at the old fire lookout tower on Blackwood Ridge last night, the one overlooking this valley. When he went to investigate this morning, he found sophisticated surveillance equipment aimed directly at this property. Long-range cameras, directional microphones, the works. Foster's expression darkened. Any indication who set it up? Nothing definitive, Wilson replied, but the equipment cases had shipping labels removed in a way that suggests professional involvement. And there's something else. Robert Daniels filed emergency permit applications this morning for extensive excavation work on 3 properties adjacent to this ranch. He's claiming urgent geological survey requirements related to potential groundwater contamination. Maria felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Montana morning. He's looking for more hidden chambers. That would be my assessment, Foster agreed. The question is how he knows to look. Agent Chen had been typing rapidly on her phone during this exchange. Sir, I'm getting confirmation that Daniel's company, Mountain Vista Properties, is a subsidiary of Axiom Developments. Axiom has connections to private military contractors who've been involved in recovering and exploiting historical technology for commercial applications. So this isn't just about resort development, Maria realized aloud. He wants what Theodore Holloway hid here. Foster turned to Dr. Parker. We need to accelerate the historical designation process. Once the property receives official protected status, any excavation on adjacent land would require archaeological oversight and permits. I'll contact the National Trust's legal team immediately, Parker assured him. We can request emergency designation based on the national security implications. While the professionals dispersed to implement immediate countermeasures, Maria found herself standing alone again, watching as her quiet dream of a simple home for her children transformed into something far more complex. The weight of Theodore, Holloway's trust pressed upon her, along with the realization that forces with significant resources now coveted what her $600 purchase had accidentally secured. Sheriff Wilson approached, his weathered face concerned. Mrs. Lawson, until this situation stabilizes, I'd feel better having regular patrols past your temporary housing in town. Daniels has resources and connections that make me uncomfortable. Thank you, Sheriff, Maria replied, suddenly grateful for the community connections that came with small-town life. I appreciate your looking out for us. Wilson nodded, adjusting his hat against the strengthening morning sun. Folks around here might have thought you were crazy buying this old place, but no one wants to see outsiders coming in and taking advantage, especially now that we're beginning to understand what the Holloways did for the country. As the sheriff departed, Agent Foster emerged from a consultation with his team. Mrs. Lawson, in light of these developments, we're recommending accelerated security measures for both the property and your family. We'll be establishing a more permanent presence until the historical designation is finalized. Maria acknowledged this with growing resolve. The past week had forced her to shed many of the insecurities that had defined her post-divorce life. Where once she might have deferred to authority without question, she now felt entitled to direct participation in decisions affecting her family's future. I appreciate the protection, Agent Foster, but I also need to be fully informed about any developments. This is my property and my children's future. I won't be kept in the dark about threats or developments that affect us. Foster studied her with newfound respect. That's entirely reasonable. I'll ensure you're briefed daily and immediately if anything urgent arises. He hesitated before adding, You've handled this situation with remarkable composure, Mrs. Lawson. Many people would have been overwhelmed by these circumstances. Maria smiled wryly. Surviving divorce, financial collapse, and single parenthood prepares you for handling the unexpected. Finding historical secrets and dealing with suspicious developers is actually refreshing by comparison. At least, it's interesting. The light moment was interrupted by the arrival of a convoy of additional federal vehicles. Maria recognized the official markings of the Department of Energy among them, an indication that the scientific implications of their discovery were being taken extremely seriously at the highest levels. The response team I requested from our scientific history division, Foster explained. They'll help evaluate the research materials and determine appropriate preservation protocols. Throughout the remainder of the day, Maria observed the methodical professionalism with which the federal teams documented and secured the second chamber's contents. Every item was photographed in place before being carefully removed, catalogued, and transferred to specialized containers. The process reminded her of archaeological documentaries she had shown her students during her teaching days, the reverent handling of artifacts that connected present to past. By late afternoon, Dr. Parker sought her out with updated paperwork, reflecting the accelerated historical designation process. We've initiated emergency procedures based on the unique circumstances. The preliminary protection should be in place within 48 hours, rather than the usual months-long process. Ooh, will that stop Daniels from excavating the neighboring properties? Maria asked. Not entirely, Parker admitted, but it will subject any ground-disturbing activities to federal oversight. He won't be able to simply bulldoze in search of additional chambers without archaeological monitors present. As evening approached, Maria reluctantly prepared to return to town. The children would be finishing their after-school activities soon, and maintaining some semblance of normal routine remained her priority, despite the extraordinary circumstances unfolding around them. Agent Chen offered to drive her, using this opportunity to provide an additional security briefing. We've established a protection detail for your temporary residents. They'll maintain a discreet presence. We don't want to alarm your children unnecessarily. I appreciate that, Maria said, watching the Holloway Ranch recede in the side mirror as they drove away. Ethan has adapted well to all this, But Sophia is still adjusting. She had nightmares after the attempted break-in last week. Chen nodded sympathetically. Children are remarkably resilient, but they need stability. We'll do everything possible to minimize disruption while ensuring your safety. Upon reaching town, Maria was surprised to find Ethan waiting at the door of their temporary housing rather than at his usual basketball practice. His expression combined excitement with barely contained anxiety. "Mom, Mr. Cooper came by the school today," he reported as soon as she stepped from the vehicle. "He showed my history class old photographs of the ranch and told stories about his grandfather. Everyone's treating me like I'm suddenly important or something." Maria sighed, recognizing the complications that came with their newfound local celebrity. "Where's Sophia?" "She's still at her art club. Mrs. Reynolds is bringing her home at 5. Ethan hesitated before adding, "Mom, is it true what people are saying, that what we found might be worth millions of dollars?" The question caught Maria off guard. While the historical preservation grants were substantial, she hadn't considered the potential market value of their discovery. "Who's saying that?" "Just people at school. Some of the kids' parents work at the county offices. They're saying Mr. Daniels is telling everyone he'll pay any price to buy our property." The implications troubled Maria deeply. Community. Speculation about their financial circumstances would only complicate their integration into Pinewood's tight-knit social fabric. She had hoped to build a normal life here, not become the subject of endless rumor and envy. "What we found is historically important," she told Ethan carefully. "And yes, the preservation grants will help us restore the ranch and live comfortably. But we're not suddenly rich, and I don't want that kind of talk creating problems for us." "Here," Ethan nodded with surprising maturity. "That's what I figured. I told everyone we were just focused on fixing up our home, not getting rich off what we found." Maria hugged him, recognizing the man he was gradually becoming despite his youth. "That was exactly the right thing to say. Now help me start dinner before your sister gets home." As they prepared a simple pasta meal together, Maria observed subtle changes in her son, a new confidence in his movements, a thoughtfulness that hadn't been present during the angry months following the divorce. Something about their extraordinary circumstances had given him purpose, a sense of being part of something larger than their small family's struggles. The ringing of her phone interrupted their cooking rhythm. Agent Foster's name appeared on the screen, unusual for this time of day unless something significant had developed. "Mrs. Lawson," Foster began without preamble when she answered. "We've had an interesting development. Robert Daniels was just observed meeting with 2 individuals at the Pinewood Cafe who have been identified as representatives of Axiom Development's Special Acquisitions Division, essentially corporate intelligence operatives. I believed you should be informed immediately." Maria turned away from Ethan, lowering her voice. "Do you think they're planning something?" Yet beneath this immediate concern stirred something deeper, a growing determination that Theodore Holloway's trust would not be misplaced. Whatever forces now sought to exploit his preserved knowledge, Maria increasingly felt responsible for ensuring it reached the world as he had intended, when humanity was ready for the responsibility it contained. The soft light of dawn gradually illuminated the room as Maria began preparing for the day ahead, resolving that this unexpected chapter in their lives would ultimately strengthen rather than diminish the future she was building for her family. The secure government facility outside Bozeman gleamed in the afternoon sun, its modern architecture at odds with the rugged Montana landscape surrounding it. For 2 weeks, Maria and her children had been living in this strange limbo, protected by federal agents in comfortable but institutional accommodations, while decisions about their future unfolded in high-level meetings they weren't permitted to attend. Maria stood at the reinforced glass window of their suite, watching Sophia play in the enclosed courtyard below. Agent Ramirez, now simply Carmen to the children, supervised the girls' exuberant exploration of the small playground that had been hastily installed to make their temporary confinement more bearable. Ethan had retreated into sullen silence after the initial excitement of their special protection had worn off, spending hours with his headphones on, shutting out a world that had once again disrupted their attempts at normality. A soft knock at the door announced Agent Foster's arrival for their daily briefing. His expression seemed lighter today, suggesting positive developments after days of cautious, non-committal updates. Mrs. Lawson, he greeted her with an actual smile, a rarity for the serious federal agent. I have significant news to share. Maria gestured toward the small sitting area where their daily meetings took place. Please tell me it includes a return date to Pinewood. The children are struggling with this confinement, regardless of how comfortable you've made it. Foster nodded sympathetically as he took a seat. That's precisely what I've come to discuss. The emergency historical designation for the Holloway Ranch was officially approved this morning. The property and all structures are now under federal protection as a national historical landmark with Level 3 security classification. What does Level 3 mean exactly? Maria asked, having learned to seek specifics in the bureaucratic language that often obscured practical implications. It's the highest protection for privately owned historical properties with national security significance, Foster explained. Any unauthorized access or disturbance is a federal offense with enhanced penalties. More importantly, it establishes a protected perimeter extending 200 yards beyond the property boundaries, effectively creating a buffer zone around the entire ranch. Maria processed this information, recognizing its implications for their safety. And Robert Daniels, what about his geological surveys on the adjacent properties? That's where things get interesting, Foster replied, satisfaction evident in his tone. The designation triggered mandatory historical impact studies for all surrounding activities. Daniels withdrew his permit applications within hours of the announcement. Furthermore, our financial intelligence unit has traced his recent movements. He appears to be liquidating his Montana holdings, 3 properties sold in the past week, all at below market rates, suggesting a hasty exit strategy. He's running? Maria couldn't hide her surprise. Daniels had seemed so determined, so confident in his position. Not running exactly, Foster clarified, more like strategic retreat. Our investigation into Axiom Development's special acquisitions division uncovered connections to several international incidents involving disputed historical technologies. When we informed certain oversight committees of their interest in the Holloway materials, several executives at their parent company suddenly announced early retirement. The legal exposure was apparently deemed too significant to justify continued pursuit of whatever they hoped to find at your property. Relief washed through Maria, though caution prevented full celebration. So we can go home? Back to the ranch? Almost, Foster replied. The final phase of securing the most sensitive materials concludes tomorrow. After that, your family can return to Pinewood. The ranch itself will require another 3 weeks of specialized work before you can occupy it permanently. But your temporary housing in town has been secured and upgraded with appropriate security measures. Maria glanced toward the window, where Sophia's laughter drifted up from the courtyard below. Will we still need protection? Agents watching us? Foster considered this carefully before responding. A reduced security presence will remain in place during the transitional period, gradually scaling back as the situation normalizes. Agent Ramirez has requested to remain assigned to your family through the initial resettlement phase, given the rapport she's established with your children. The thought of returning to some version of normal life brought both relief and apprehension. Their brief time in Pinewood before the discovery had barely allowed them to establish connections in the community. Now they would return as something different, owners of a nationally significant historical site, recipients of substantial preservation grants, and the family who had brought federal attention to the small Montana town. What about the materials recovered from the hidden chambers? Maria asked. Theodore Holloway clearly intended them to be preserved for future generations. I feel a responsibility to ensure his wishes are respected. Foster nodded with apparent approval. The scientific and historical materials are being carefully catalogued and digitized by a joint team from the National Archives and the Department of Energy. Certain elements with continuing security sensitivity will remain classified, but Dr. Parker has been advocating successfully for maximum public access to the historical documents and research materials. And the prototypes, the medical technology, that was decades ahead of its time? That's perhaps the most positive outcome of this entire situation, Foster replied, genuine enthusiasm breaking through his professional reserve. The cancer treatment protocols documented in Holloway's research are being evaluated by a specialized team at the National Institutes of Health. Preliminary assessment suggests they may offer therapeutic approaches that could significantly advance current treatment methodologies, particularly for certain resistant forms of the disease. Maria thought of her own father, lost to an aggressive cancer when she was in college. The possibility that their accidental discovery might contribute to medical advancement added another dimension to the significance of what had happened. "When can I tell the children we're going home?" she asked, the practical question of a mother whose primary concern remained her family's stability. "You can prepare them today. We'll begin transport arrangements tomorrow morning, with arrival in Pinewood scheduled for late afternoon." As Foster departed with promises of additional details to follow, Maria stood again at the window, watching Sophia now engaged in an elaborate game of hopscotch with Agent Ramirez. The child's resilience continued to amaze her, adapting to each new circumstance with a flexibility Maria sometimes envied. In contrast, Ethan's adolescent sensitivity made transitions harder, his need for stability and predictability more pronounced. She would need to approach their return carefully, helping both children navigate yet another shift in their increasingly complex lives. The prospect of permanent residence at the ranch, once it was deemed safe and habitable, offered the promise of the stable home she had sought when bidding those fateful $600 at the tax auction. It's difficult to say, but their presence escalates our security concerns. These aren't ordinary corporate representatives. They're former military intelligence personnel who specialize in acquiring sensitive technologies through various means, not all of them entirely legal. Should we be worried about staying in town tonight? "We've increased security around your temporary residence," Foster assured her. "But I'd like to station an agent inside as well, if you're comfortable with that arrangement. Female, plainclothes, experienced in family protection details." Maria considered the implications, particularly for the children. "That seems reasonable, given the circumstances. When should we expect her?" "Agent Ramirez will arrive within the hour. She'll integrate into your household routine as naturally as possible, perhaps as a friend staying over while work is done on the ranch." By the time Sophia arrived home from art club, bursting with stories about her day and proudly displaying a colorful drawing of what she imagined their renovated ranch would look like, Agent Ramirez had already been introduced as Ms. Carmen, a historian helping with the ranch documentation who needed a place to stay temporarily. Sophia accepted this explanation without question, immediately engaging the agent in enthusiastic conversation about her plans for decorating her bedroom once they moved to the ranch permanently. Maria observed with relief as Ramirez balanced professional vigilance with genuine warmth toward the children, helping set the table while maintaining subtle awareness of sight lines to windows and doors. The evening proceeded with surface normalcy. Homework was completed, showers taken, bedtime stories read. Yet beneath this domestic rhythm, Maria remained acutely conscious of the armed federal agent now settled on their living room sofa, the discreet security vehicle parked down the street, and the unseen forces that appeared increasingly interested in what they had discovered. After the children were asleep, Maria joined Agent Ramirez in the living room, speaking quietly to avoid waking them. "Do you really think Daniels would try something else? The restraining order should keep him away legally." Ramirez's expression remained professionally neutral. "People with resources sometimes believe legal constraints don't apply to them, Mrs. Lawson. More concerning are the Axiom operatives. They specialize in acquiring assets that others have discovered, using whatever methods prove expedient." "By assets, you mean the research materials we found?" "Precisely. The scientific advancements documented in Theodore Holloway's archives represent potentially valuable intellectual property even decades later. Certain entities would pay significant sums to acquire research that never entered the public domain." Maria considered this, remembering Theodore Holloway's letter with its reference to threatening established power structures. Perhaps the old security chief had anticipated that his preserved knowledge would attract exactly this kind of attention, even generations later. "What happens tomorrow?" she asked. "Agent Foster has requested specialized equipment to conduct a more comprehensive survey of the entire ranch property," Ramirez explained. "Ground-penetrating radar, thermal imaging, the most advanced detection technology available. If Theodore Holloway created additional secure locations beyond the two we've already found, we'll identify them." "And Daniels?" "Sheriff Wilson has deputies monitoring his movements. If he approaches within the restricted distance, he'll be detained immediately. The Axiom operatives are under similar surveillance." Despite these reassurances, sleep proved elusive that night. Maria lay awake long after the house had grown quiet, her mind replaying the extraordinary sequence of events that had transformed her desperate $600 gamble into something that powerful people now coveted. The irony wasn't lost on her. For years, following her divorce, she had felt powerless, a struggling single mother whose financial security and professional identity had been sacrificed to a marriage that ultimately failed. Now she found herself at the center of something significant enough to attract federal protection and corporate espionage. Theodore Holloway's words echoed in her thoughts. "I chose to preserve this knowledge in the hope that future generations might approach it with greater wisdom than my own." The responsibility implied in that statement felt suddenly personal, as if the long-dead security chief had entrusted his legacy specifically to her family. Just before dawn, Maria finally drifted into uneasy sleep, only to be awakened an hour later by the insistent ringing of her phone. Agent Foster's voice, tense and urgent, jolted her fully awake. "Mrs. Lawson, there's been an incident at the ranch. Someone attempted to access the site overnight. Our security systems intercepted them, but they escaped before we could detain them. Nothing was damaged or taken, but we're implementing heightened protocols immediately." Fully alert now, Maria glanced toward the hallway where her children still slept. "Do you think they'll try again?" "That's our working assumption. The equipment they left behind suggests professional operational capability, not ordinary trespassers or curious locals." "What do you need from me?" Foster's response was measured but direct. "We believe your family should relocate to a more secure location until the historical designation is formalized and additional security infrastructure is in place at both the ranch and your permanent residence." "You want us to leave Pinewood?" The prospect sent a spike of anxiety through Maria. They had already endured so much relocation and uncertainty. "Not necessarily," Foster clarified. "We can arrange secure accommodations within the region." The children could continue attending their current school with appropriate security measures, but your current temporary housing is too exposed, with too many potential access points. Maria considered her sleeping children, the life they were, cautiously building in Pinewood, and the strange legacy they had unwittingly inherited. How long would this relocation last? 2 weeks at most. By then, the historical designation will be finalized. Permanent security systems will be in place at the ranch, and will have completed the removal of the most sensitive materials to secure federal facilities. The decision wasn't easy, but maternal instinct ultimately outweighed all other considerations. All right, but I want minimal disruption for the children. They've been through enough transitions already. Understood. We'll arrange everything with that priority in mind. Agent Ramirez will remain with you throughout, and I'll personally oversee the secure transfer. As Maria ended the call, she stood in the quiet pre-dawn darkness of the borrowed house, contemplating how to explain yet another upheaval to her children. The irony of their situation struck her anew. They had purchased the Holloway Ranch seeking stability, only to find themselves temporarily homeless again because of what they'd discovered there. Yet their lives would never be quite as simple as she had initially imagined, now inextricably linked to Theodore Holloway's remarkable legacy. When Maria gathered the children that evening to share the news, their reactions reflected their distinct personalities. Sophia erupted with excitement, peppering her mother with questions about returning to school, seeing friends, and whether their new house would still have secret rooms. Ethan's response was more measured, relief evident beneath his careful neutrality as he asked practical questions about security arrangements and the timeline for actually moving into the ranch itself. "Will we be, like, famous now?" he asked with typical teenage concern about social standing. Everyone at school was already weird about it before we left. "Not famous," Maria assured him. "The historical significance of the ranch will attract some attention, but Dr. Parker says we can manage that through scheduled research visits and limited public access. Our home will remain private, just with some very unusual history." The following morning brought a flurry of activity as they prepared for departure. Government staff efficiently packed the few belongings they had brought to the secure facility, while Agent Foster conducted a final briefing on the security protocols that would remain in place during their transition back to Pinewood. "The local sheriff's department has been fully briefed and will maintain regular patrols past your temporary housing," he explained. "The ranch property remains under 24-hour federal surveillance until the final security systems are installed and the most sensitive materials removed." The children listened with varying levels of interest as Foster outlined the practical aspects of their return. School notifications had been handled, their temporary house had been thoroughly cleaned and prepared, and arrangements made for continued protection that would be as unobtrusive as possible. "Will Carmen still be with us?" Sophia asked, having bonded deeply with Agent Ramirez during their confinement. "I'll be staying through your transition period," Ramirez confirmed with a warm smile. "Though my official capacity will gradually shift from protection detail to liaison for the historical preservation process." The journey from the secure facility to Pinewood took just over 3 hours, their government convoy gradually reducing in size and visibility as they approached the small town. By the time they reached the outskirts, only 2 unmarked vehicles remained, one carrying the family and Agent Ramirez, the other containing a security team that would maintain a discreet distance. Maria felt a complex mixture of emotions as familiar landmarks came into view. Despite having spent only a few weeks in Pinewood before their discovery and subsequent relocation, the town already felt like a place of significance in their family story. The modest main street with its mix of struggling businesses and empty storefronts, the small school where the children had just begun to make connections, The county offices where she had impulsively placed her $600 bid all now carried layers of meaning beyond their humble appearances. As they turned onto Cedar Lane, where their temporary housing awaited, Maria noticed subtle changes in the neighborhood. Fresh paint adorned several nearby homes. Yards showed signs of recent landscaping, and a previously vacant house appeared to be undergoing renovation. The economic ripple effects of their discovery were already visible in the community. Their temporary residence itself had undergone transformation during their absence. The modest rental property had been thoroughly cleaned, with new furniture replacing the mismatched second-hand pieces they had hastily assembled after the auction. Security upgrades were visible to Maria's now trained eye: reinforced door frames, specialized window locks, and discrete camera systems monitoring the perimeter. The National Historical Trust arranged for the improvements, Agent Ramirez explained, as the children explored the upgraded space with exclamations of surprise. Dr. Parker felt your family deserved appropriate accommodations given your contribution to historical preservation. As Sophia discovered new bedding featuring her favorite colors and Ethan examined the high-speed internet equipment that had been installed in what would become his room, Maria stepped onto the back porch, breathing deeply of the crisp Montana air. After 2 weeks of filtered air and institutional surroundings, the simple pleasure of standing outside without security protocols felt like profound freedom. The sound of a vehicle approaching drew her attention. Dr. Parker emerged from her practical SUV, carrying what appeared to be architectural drawings. "Welcome back," the older woman greeted her warmly. "I thought you might like to see the preliminary restoration plans for the ranch. The preservation architects have been working around the clock to develop proposals that honor both the historical elements and your family's needs." Inside, they spread the drawings across the dining table, revealing detailed plans for transforming the dilapidated Holloway Ranch into a functional family home that preserved its historical significance while incorporating modern comforts. "The original structure will be carefully restored," Parker explained, pointing to exterior renderings that maintained the classic farmhouse aesthetic. "But we've redesigned the interior to include updated systems, heating, plumbing, electrical, all concealed within the historical framework." The children joined them, curiosity overcoming their exploration of the house. Sophia gasped with delight at the colorful renderings showing her future bedroom in the renovated upper floor, while Ethan studied the technical specifications with growing interest. "What about the hidden chambers?" he asked. "Will they still be there?" Dr. Parker nodded, turning to specialized drawings of the underground spaces. "Both chambers will be preserved intact, though the most sensitive materials will be replaced with appropriate reproductions. The access points will be secured but functional, allowing for supervised educational access while maintaining security." Maria examined the comprehensive plans with growing appreciation for the thoughtfulness behind them. The restoration would preserve Theodore Holloway's legacy while creating a comfortable home for her family, a balance that honored both past and future. "The timeline indicates completion within 4 months," Parker continued. "The National Trust has assigned their premier restoration team, and funding has been fully secured through the Emergency Preservation Grant. In the meantime, this temporary housing has been leased for 6 months to ensure your family has stable accommodations throughout the process." The remainder of the day passed in a blur of adjustment as they settled into their upgraded temporary home. Neighbors stopped by with curious welcome, their genuine friendliness mixed with barely concealed interest in what had occurred during the family's mysterious absence. Maria navigated these interactions carefully, following the guidance provided by Agent Foster about appropriate disclosures regarding their discovery. By evening, A semblance of normal routine had begun to emerge. Sophia had arranged her stuffed animals in elaborate formation on her new bedding. Ethan had connected his gaming system to the upgraded internet service. And Maria found herself in the unexpectedly well-equipped kitchen, preparing their first home-cooked meal in weeks. As they gathered around the dining table, the normality of the moment struck Maria with unexpected emotion. Just months ago, they had been living in a cramped apartment in Missoula, her teaching position eliminated through budget cuts, their financial future increasingly precarious after the divorce settlement left them with almost nothing. The desperate gamble on a tax auction property had been her last attempt to provide some kind of stability for her children. Now they sat in a comfortable home, with educational trusts established for both children, a substantial restoration project underway, on property they owned outright, and financial security that would allow Maria to focus on creating the life she had always wanted for her family. The extraordinary circumstances that had created this reversal still seemed surreal, as if they might evaporate upon too close examination. "Mom, can we visit the ranch tomorrow?" Sophia asked, interrupting Maria's reflection. "I want to see what they're doing to fix it up." "Agent Foster mentioned a scheduled visit on Thursday," Maria replied. "They're still completing some of the security installations and material transfers. We need to follow their timeline for now." Ethan looked up from his plate with unexpected intensity. "Do you think Mr. Holloway knew someone would find his hidden rooms eventually? Like, did he plan for it to be discovered someday?" The question revealed her son's deepening engagement with the philosophical aspects of their discovery, something Maria had observed developing during their time in protective custody. "His letter suggests he did," she answered thoughtfully. "He preserved that knowledge intentionally, wanting it to be found when people could use it responsibly. I'm not sure he could have anticipated exactly how or when that would happen, but he clearly believed in the importance of what he was protecting. So we were meant to find it," Sophia concluded with childhood certainty. "That's why no one bought the ranch before us, even though it was super cheap. It was waiting for us." Maria smiled at her daughter's straightforward interpretation, though the sentiment resonated more deeply than she cared to admit. The improbable chain of events that had led them to the Holloway Ranch sometimes did seem guided by something beyond mere coincidence. The following morning brought their reintegration into community life as Maria drove the children to school for the first time since their abrupt departure. Agent Ramirez accompanied them, her role now officially described as historical consultant to maintain appearances while continuing protective oversight. The school principal, Mr. Delaney, greeted them personally at the entrance, his typically formal demeanor softened by genuine concern for the children's well-being after their unexplained absence. "Welcome back, Lawson family," he said warmly. "We've prepared the teachers and students with appropriate information about your temporary relocation for home renovations. No mention of federal involvement or historical discoveries as requested by the authorities." Maria appreciated the discretion, recognizing the importance of helping her children maintain as much normalcy as possible despite their extraordinary circumstances. "Thank you for your understanding. We're hoping to re-establish regular routines now that we're back in town." As the children departed for their classrooms, Sophia skipping eagerly toward her friends, Ethan moving with more measured determination, Maria felt the familiar maternal mixture of concern and hope that accompanied each school day. "They'll adjust quickly," Ramirez observed beside her. "Children are remarkably adaptable, especially when returning to familiar environments." Their next stop was the county administrative offices, where Maria needed to complete additional paperwork related to the historical designation of their property. The atmosphere as they entered the building was noticeably different from their previous visits. Gone was the barely concealed pity that had accompanied her desperate tax auction bid, replaced by a respectful deference that made her slightly uncomfortable. County Clerk Deborah Simmons, who had processed Maria's original property purchase with professional courtesy but evident skepticism, now greeted her with almost excessive warmth. "Mrs. Lawson, we're so pleased to have you back in Pinewood. The historical designation of your property is the most exciting development in the county since." She paused, apparently struggling to identify a comparable event in the town's quiet history. "Since the interstate bypassed us in 1987, supplied her colleague with dry humor. "Suddenly everyone's talking about historical tourism potential and preservation grants. You've single-handedly reversed our property value decline." Maria completed the necessary paperwork with growing awareness of her changed status within the community. What had begun as a desperate attempt to provide basic shelter for her family had transformed into something with significance beyond her personal circumstances. A shift that carried both opportunity and responsibility. When they departed the county offices, Ramirez suggested they visit the Pinewood Cafe for lunch before collecting the children from school. The small restaurant had been Maria's employer during her brief initial period in town, a job she had taken out of immediate financial necessity while searching for teaching positions. The cafe owner, Betty Richards, emerged from behind the counter upon seeing Maria enter, wiping her hands on her apron as she approached with a broad smile. "There she is, our local celebrity," Betty declared loudly enough for all patrons to hear. "Bought the old Holloway place for pocket change and turned it into a national landmark." Maria felt herself flush with embarrassment at the unwanted attention. "Hardly a celebrity, Betty, just lucky timing and unusual circumstances." "Call it what you want," Betty replied with a dismissive wave, "but this town's seen more activity in the weeks since your discovery than in the decade before. 3 new property sales, contractors booking up months in advance for renovation work, and I've had actual tourists, stopping and asking about the historic Holloway Ranch and whether tours are available yet." As Betty led them to a table, continuing her enthusiastic assessment of the economic ripple effects, Maria noticed a familiar figure watching from a corner booth. Frank Morgan, the elderly local who had initially warned her against purchasing that money pit of a ranch, raised his coffee cup in a gesture that seemed equal parts acknowledgement and apology. After they ordered, Frank approached their table, his weathered face set in an expression of determined dignity. "Mrs. Lawson," he began formally, "I owe you an apology. When you bought the Holloway place, I thought you were making a terrible mistake, throwing away money you clearly couldn't afford to lose on a property nobody wanted. Turns out you saw something the rest of us missed for decades." Maria smiled, genuinely touched by the old man's humility. "I didn't see anything special, Mr. Morgan. I just needed an affordable place for my family. Everything that happened afterward was pure chance." Frank shook his head slowly. "Don't believe in chance myself. Holloway was an odd duck. Always watching, always careful about who he let close to that property. My father worked for him briefly in the late 40s, said he'd never met a more cautious man, figured he was just peculiar. But now," he gestured vaguely, indicating the broader implications of the discovery. "Did your father ever mention anything unusual about the ranch?" Ramirez asked, her casual tone belying the intelligence-gathering nature of the question. "Nothing specific," Frank replied. "Just that Holloway had strict rules about certain areas of the property being off-limits to workers. The barn foundation, particularly, wouldn't let anyone near it for repairs or modifications. Dad always thought he might be hiding liquor during Prohibition, but the timing was wrong for that." As they continued their meal following Frank's departure, Maria observed the subtle dynamics unfolding around them. The cafe patrons maintained a respectful distance while clearly discussing her presence. The careful balance between curiosity and consideration reflected the small-town environment she had hoped would provide stability for her children, a community tight-knit enough to offer support, but respectful enough to allow privacy. The afternoon brought their first scheduled visit to the Holloway Ranch since returning to Pinewood. Agent Foster met them at the property entrance, where an official-looking security checkpoint had been established. The perimeter fencing had been completed during their absence, transforming the once open property into a secured compound without sacrificing its historical aesthetic. "We've made significant progress," Foster explained as they drove up the newly graded driveway. "The structural stabilization is complete, and the specialized preservation team has begun the detailed restoration work." The transformation since their departure was remarkable. Scaffolding surrounded the farmhouse where craftspeople were, carefully restoring the original siding and ornamental trim. The barn's exterior had been stabilized, its faded red paint meticulously matched and refreshed by specialists in historical preservation. Most striking was the activity around the locations of the hidden chambers. A discreet modern structure had been erected adjacent to the barn, its architecture deliberately unobtrusive, while clearly housing sophisticated monitoring equipment. Similar modifications were visible near the main house, where the first hidden room had been discovered. "The security systems are state-of-the-art," Foster explained as they parked near the house. "Motion detection, thermal imaging, and specialized sensors monitoring the preserved chambers. Everything is designed to blend with the historical character of the property while providing maximum protection." Inside the house, the children explored with exclamations of surprise and delight. The interior spaces had been meticulously cleared of decades of neglect, revealing architectural details that had been hidden beneath layers of dust and deterioration. Original hardwood floors gleamed where Maria had once seen only warped, stained planking. Window frames had been expertly restored, and the skeleton of updated electrical and plumbing systems was visible where walls had been opened for renovation. "This is going to be our actual house?" Sophia asked, her eyes wide as she spun in circles in what would become their living room. "It's like a museum, but we get to live in it." "That's exactly the balance we're striving for," confirmed Dr. Parker, who had joined them for the tour. "Historical authenticity with modern livability. The public areas will maintain period-appropriate appearances, while private family spaces will incorporate contemporary comforts more discreetly." As the children continued their exploration, with Agent Ramirez, Dr. Parker led Maria to a newly constructed space at the rear of the house, an addition so carefully designed that it appeared to have always been part of the original structure. "We thought you might appreciate a dedicated space for administration and research coordination," Parker explained, opening the door to reveal a well-appointed office. "Once the restoration is complete and the site opens for limited research access, you'll need a professional environment for managing those activities." The room featured built-in bookshelves, a substantial desk positioned to provide views of the property, and state-of-the-art technology discreetly integrated into the historical aesthetic. It was, Maria realized, a physical manifestation of the role being prepared for her, caretaker of Theodore Holloway's legacy while building her own family's future. "The National Trust would like to offer you a formal position," Parker continued, confirming Maria's intuition. "Site administrator for the Holloway Historical Preservation Project. The role comes with the annual stipend we discussed previously, benefits including comprehensive health coverage, and schedule flexibility to accommodate your family responsibilities." Maria walked slowly around the space, running her fingers along the polished wood of the desk, taking in the careful balance of history and functionality. "I'm not a historian or a preservation specialist," she said finally. "What qualifies me for this role? You're the one who found what generations of others missed," Parker replied simply. "More importantly, you immediately recognized its significance and took responsible action to protect it. Theodore Holloway spent decades preserving knowledge he believed should eventually benefit humanity. Your instincts aligned perfectly with his intentions." The offer represented yet another unexpected turn in the cascade of changes flowing from their discovery. Maria had been working to rebuild her teaching career when financial necessity forced her to take service jobs and ultimately gamble on the tax auction property. Now she was being offered a role that would allow her to remain connected to education, while carrying forward a historical legacy of unexpected significance. Their tour concluded with a visit to the secured facility adjacent to the barn, where the most sensitive materials from the hidden chambers were being processed before transfer to specialized government archives. The clinical environment contrasted sharply with the rustic exterior, housing advanced scanning equipment, climate-controlled preservation systems, and workstations where experts carefully documented each artifact. Approximately 70% of the recovered materials will remain on-site in secure display conditions, Foster explained. Items with continuing security sensitivity or exceptional historical value will be transferred to appropriate federal facilities, with detailed reproductions maintained here for educational purposes. As they prepared to depart, Maria paused at the barn entrance, gazing back at the structure that had hidden Theodore Holloway's extraordinary legacy for nearly 8 decades. The slanting afternoon light caught the freshly painted trim, making the building appear almost as it must have in its prime, a deliberate disguise for its remarkable contents. "He chose this place so carefully," she said quietly, more to herself than those around her. "Remote enough to maintain secrecy, ordinary enough to avoid attention, yet built to preserve what he considered too valuable to lose." Dr. Parker nodded, understanding the philosophical turn of Maria's thoughts. The most effective preservation often occurs in plain sight. People see what they expect to see: a weathered old barn, a struggling ranch, never imagining what might be hidden beneath the surface. Maria thought of her own journey, a divorced single mother whose desperate circumstances had led to an extraordinary discovery. Her unremarkable appearance and ordinary struggles had concealed her determination and resilience, just as the dilapidated ranch had hidden historical treasures beneath its weathered exterior. "We'll be good caretakers," she said with sudden certainty, "not just of the physical property, but of what it represents. Theodore Holloway trusted future generations to use this knowledge wisely. We won't disappoint him." As they returned to town, the children bubbling with excitement about their future home, Maria felt a profound sense of coming full circle. The journey that had begun with a desperate bid at a tax auction had transformed not just their material circumstances, but their connection to history and community. The security and stability she had sought for her children would now be built upon a foundation more solid than she could have imagined. Not merely walls and a roof, but purpose and legacy reaching beyond their individual lives. The Holloway Ranch would become their home, but also something more. A bridge between past and future, a repository of knowledge preserved for generations yet to come, and the unlikely beginning of their family's own place in history. What had started as a $600 gamble for basic shelter had become a priceless inheritance of responsibility and opportunity. The sunset painted the Montana sky in spectacular hues as they drove back toward Pinewood, illuminating the landscape that had become unexpectedly central to their lives. Ahead lay months of restoration work, the gradual establishment of research protocols, and the careful integration of their family life with the property's historical significance. Yet for the first time since the divorce had upended their world, Maria felt absolute certainty that they were exactly where they were meant to be. As Sophia dozed against her shoulder and Ethan gazed thoughtfully out the window, Maria silently thanked Theodore Holloway for his foresight in preserving what he had deemed too valuable to lose. In an unexpected symmetry across time, his hidden legacy had preserved something equally precious for her family. A future built on solid ground, both literally and figuratively. The Holloway Ranch awaited their return, not just as owners, but as caretakers of a history that had chosen them through a remarkable convergence of circumstance, need, and destiny. Their $600 investment had yielded returns beyond material measurement. A home, a purpose, and a place in a continuum of preservation that would extend far beyond their own lives. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.